Come right in, Mr. Farmer. Sit down in that big chair. That's a Texas-sized chair. And as he was jerking my arm out of the socket, his phone rang. And he answered it. It was some senator returning his call. And he was twisting this caller's arm, trying to get him to commit himself to vote for the Civil Rights Bill.
Now, you either for civil rights or you're not. You're either the party of Lincoln or you ain't. And that's about God put up or shut up. And we've been talking about this for 100 years. Looks like about time to stop talking. And I just think that we're going to have them out in the streets again if we don't make some little progress.
He was doing all that he could, and all the while he was throwing a glance at me to make sure that I was listening.
So here was the liberal Lyndon Johnson leading America into a social revolution. And there was the head of his federal police force going all out to frustrate him. Friends of Martin Luther King have told us that on his travels in the South, King never felt physically safe. But at the Willard Hotel in Washington, King thought he could relax with his friends. King didn't know about the listening post the FBI had set up in the next-door suite. For 17 hours, agents recorded conversations between King and several colleagues and visitors, 2 of whom were women. Clarence Jones, who was there, does not deny that King had sex during his stay. He blames King for falling into an FBI trap.
Putting aside the morality of the issue, it's a question of the politics of the issue. The politics of the issue was that it was politically irresponsible. It was politically dangerous because it was feeding right into the hands of the FBI, giving them grist that they would, to use against them that they otherwise would not have had. Let me just say this. Whatever occurred during that 17-hour period in that hotel suite that concerned Hoover, that was between Martin King and his family and Martin King and his God.
William Sullivan and Edgar Hoover went through the tapes together. The bugging team was told it had unearthed enough to destroy Dr. King. Hoover ordered a full transcript to be made and a summary to be hand-carried to the White House. An internal memo suggests it was shown to Walter Jenkins, the White House Chief of Staff, and the President.
I find it shocking that the Bureau would do that, that the Bureau would not only do that, but would go to the seat of government, the White House, and feel free to sort of boast about it. I find it shocking that the White House would have gone along.
The White House or President Johnson? Neither in the LBJ telephone tapes nor in any other available records is there any evidence pointing to Johnson's involvement. If he did read the Willard Hotel bedroom transcripts, he would not have wanted them to be leaked. Clarence Jones explains why.
If that kind of information had come out, it would have been used to discredit Martin King, would have been used to discredit the civil rights movement, would have been used as a and probably effectively used, as a smokescreen to say, you see the kind of people who really want these civil rights, you see the kind of people there really are. You're not dealing with people who are legitimately oppressed. You're not dealing with people who are people of character or good morality and all this moral plea to the consciousness. Look at the kind of people they are. They're people who are communists. They're people who engage in so-called immoral activities. I think it would have been devastating.
The success of the Willard Hotel sting stimulated Hoover's appetite. More than a dozen FBI field offices were drawn into Operation Zorro as King traveled across America from Hawaii to New York. And FBI records show, or claim, that he was caught out in at least 2 more sexual encounters. On March the 9th, The President and the FBI chief spent 4 hours together in the Oval Office. Hoover, after 4 decades at the head of the FBI, was nearly 65 and facing mandatory retirement. Only special legislation could keep him in office. If Johnson had wanted to get rid of Hoover, this was the time to do it. But Johnson had never failed Hoover, and he didn't fail him now.
J. Edgar Hoover celebrates his 40th year as head of the FBI. The FBI chief will reach retirement age this year, but President Johnson has signed a bill permitting him to stay on. It's a happy anniversary for Mr. Hoover.
I'm very proud to join in this tribute to one of America's most outstanding public servants, J. Edgar Hoover. We are especially fortunate to have Mr. Hoover's strong personal dedication to maintaining the high standards of protection for civil liberties of the individual under our system of law.
In June, the Civil Rights Bill was still bottled up in the Senate. As Johnson had feared, the Deep South was in ferment, with thousands of black and white students from the North flooding into states like Mississippi to force the pace of radical reform. To the Southern white establishment, it was an invasion of left-wing radicals.
The hardcore of this group are your beatnik-type people. Long beards, ringlets of hair on the back of the neck, down almost to the shoulder blades, strictly nonconformists, some of them that you would call weirdos.
In Jackson, his state capital, the governor had recruited 100 extra men for riot control and had bought them an armored car, 200 shotguns and gas masks.
We are going to see to it that law and order is maintained, and maintained Mississippi style.
The president got on the phone again to his friend from Georgia, Richard Russell.
Now, the governor of Mississippi wants to come up here and see me, and I think that'll just cause a lot of talk about my selling out.
I think you'd have to see any governor of any state of the union to see.
I told them I'd do that, but they tell me that every family down there is buying a gun, and every nigger family's got a gun, and that they're going to be the damnedest shootings you ever saw, and they're sending them in by buses and hundreds from all over the country to help them register, and they're going to try to get them all registered in Mississippi, and they're going to be a bunch of killers.
Dr. King, meanwhile, together with 4 close aides, had moved his personal campaign to America's oldest city, St. Augustine in Florida. The town was a stronghold of the Ku Klux Klan. Many of its members had been sworn in as special deputies by the sheriff, an outspoken segregationist. For King, that made it a perfect place from which to keep the struggle on the nation's television screens and ratchet up the pressure on Washington.
Martin King, as a leader, as a person, was fearless. To say that he was fearless is not to say that he was unafraid. The Martin King that I knew and observed had a fear that any day, any time, he could be killed. And I sometimes, as I've thought back over the years, how does one live like that? How does one live like that?
Unknown to King, a squad of FBI men had followed him from Atlanta. On arrival, they telexed Washington for permission to plant the usual devices in a cottage King had rented in the white segregated part of the town. When King demanded the desegregation of beaches and swimming pools, hotels and lunch counters, local whites denounced him as an outsider nigger and communist. When he received death threats, he went to a local church and announced that he would stay in the town.